I would recommend that everyone creates a basic mixing template. And I'm not saying do something so that you can do the same thing over and over again. That's not the point at all. If you systemize a few things, you actually have more time and more freedom to be creative because you don't have to do the repetitive stuff over and over again and focus on that.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast. I am your host, Benedikt Hein. I am a mixing engineer. I run a mixing studio called Outback Recordings. And at the studio, we mix more than 200 songs per year, sometimes 250, up to 300 songs. So we mix a lot of songs. And not all of these songs are produced in big, super expensive studios. A lot of them are done by DIY bands, self-recording bands, recording themselves and then sending the tracks over to us for mixing. So naturally, over the last, 10, 15 years, we've worked with many bands, and we've coached a lot of them through the recording process, helping them get better tones at the source, helping them make better recordings at their jam spaces, and then also, of course, doing the mixes for them. Then we transitioned to showing them how we mix things. So some of them mix themselves now, and that all led to this platform and this podcast, the Self-Recording Band, where we want to help you do the same, get more out of your jam space, make exciting sounding music from wherever you are. If that sounds interesting to you, you are in the right place. If you're already a listener and you know all of that, welcome. Glad to have you back as always. Thank you for joining us again today. If you're discovering this on YouTube, please know that this is primarily a podcast. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you enjoy podcasts. And if you listen on Spotify, but you enjoy to watch your content, then go to YouTube, search for the Self-Recording Band, and subscribe there and watch the episodes. All right. Today's episode is I think we've done one of those last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, depending on when this gets published. But this is another workshop recording of a live talk that we've done on stage. So we've published one about getting it right at the source. So if you want to check that out, please do. Now it's time to start talking about the mixing workflow, how to improve your mix workflow. We've done that talk also at Studioszene 2024 in Hamburg. And when I say we, I mean Malcolm Owen Flood, my co-host, and myself. And we went on the gear stage there and did it in front of a live audience and talked about how to improve your mixing workflow. There's not much to say about that. We help you, understand what we mean when we say use a template, how you can make your life easier when it comes to mixing, and most importantly, how to avoid the decision-making fatigue affecting your music. What I mean by that is we can only make so many decisions per day, and after a while of working on the same thing, we just get tired, or in general, we get tired. And we don't want to waste a bunch of energy and decision-making power on decisions that don't really matter. So every time you start a mix, you do a couple of things that are repetitive, and you want to get those out of the way. You want to optimize your workflow and your sessions and how you think about mixing and your whole approach so that when you start mixing, you can immediately make decisions that matter, focus on the song, serve the music, react to the music intuitively, and don't waste a bunch of brain power on things that don't really make a difference at the end and that you do over and over again every single time anyways. Long story short, there's this entire workshop about it. Here it is. Enjoy.
Hello. First of all, thank you so much for joining us here at the gear stage. My name is Benedikt Hein. This is Malcolm Owen Flood.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all.
We are both mixing engineers and music producers. I mix exclusively these days. Malcolm does a bit of both, kinds of. And we both host the Self-Recording Band Podcast. And we've been doing this for, in my case, it's 12, 13 years that I'm doing full-time mixing. I don't know how long you've been doing full-time audio.
I've lost count a long time ago now.
But we've mixed a whole lot of songs, of course. We mix at my studio, we mix about 200 songs every year at least. And so mix workflow is very important. It is, first of all, important to just get work done, but it's also important to be in a flow state so you can actually serve the song and make good creative decisions. And have fun while you're at it. It should not be this tedious thing where you repeat things over and over again that should just be done once. So it is very much a creative process. It should be fun. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to share it says there, we're going to share 6 ways to improve your mixing workflow. We focused on these 6. We have 30 minutes time, so I hope we can get it done in this time. And we're going to also share a few things in an actual DAW session. So let's jump in, I say, right?
Yeah, real quick, just to help us know who we're talking to, could you let us know if you are, let's start with a musician first rather than a recording engineer. If you kind of classify yourself as a musician that is maybe recording your own music, let's put hands up for that scenario. All right, cool. And then the alternative being more of a recording engineer, maybe doing this professionally, that type of person. Let's have
or mixing engineer. All right.
All right. And then I guess there's some hands that didn't go up, so there's some areas in between there as well, which is cool. So I think this will apply to both, because being like not having this down, if you're trying to do it as a musician, it's going to get in the way of you actually getting the song recorded. And it takes forever, you lose creativity, you get frustrated, which is not a good mindset to be in, being creative and trying to record a song at all. And then on the flip side, if you do this professionally, doing these sorts of things will help you get your, like, it's the only way to do it and make a living, because you have to be efficient while still putting out high quality work. So I hope this helps everybody that's sitting here, and I think it will. And just, even if we word it to one person, kind of take it and see how it applies to your own situation, and I think you'll get something out of this.
Okay, cool. Let's dive into this. So let's start with a little overview over those 6 ways before we get into details. So, first of all, it's all about the song. This is like kind of the theme of all of this. Like, the point is we want to serve the song. It's about the music. It's not about the tech stuff. The tech is part of it when we need to know it, and it's also fun. But at the end of the day, we're making art, we're making music, and all these things that we're going to talk about are going to help us do that. So the first point we're going to be talking about here is, like, don't half-ass the recording. Like, take the recording process seriously, because I know it's about mixing, but if you record yourself or you record others and you don't take this first part seriously, of course, you're gonna have to fight those tracks later in the mix. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit. Then it's about comping and editing before you even start to mix. Again, you wanna be your future self's best friend, and you wanna prepare everything so that you can actually focus on the mix and get into a good workflow. Then we're going to be talking about mix prep, like actually setting up the mix session and things that go into that, how to create like a template, maybe how to systematize some things so that you don't have to do them over and over again. And all the steps that go into prepping a mix so that when you're mixing, you can be fully focused on the music. Then we're going to talk a little bit about monitoring, because you will only get into a flow state and get a good workflow if you can trust what you're hearing, if you really know what things sound like on your system, and you're not constantly question your decisions because of that. Then we're going to be talking about you knowing what you actually want, having that vision, that sound in your head, because it's super hard to hit a target that you can't see. Like, if you don't know what you're going for, achieving a good workflow is very hard. And many people don't have that really. When I talk to people that send us stuff for feedback, then sometimes they don't even know what they want to achieve, and then it's super hard for me to give advice or feedback when they don't have that artistic vision down. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to move fast, and also the importance of taking breaks and just stepping away from it for a while, because we get too close to it, as you all know, when we work on it for a while. And so that's point number 6. So let's start with the first point here, the recording. The first one is here. Malcolm, I think we both agree this is kind of one of the most important things, that you focus on the energy, the emotion, the feel, because you can fix a lot in the mix, but you're going to be pulling your hair out trying to bring back magic that was never there to begin with. So if you cut corners there, then you're going to be fighting that in the mix, and you just can't bring that stuff back. You can fix a lot of the technical stuff, right?
You can't fix this, though.
What was that?
You can't fix this. It's either there or it's not, really. Like,
Exactly.
Energy is unfixable with any plugin, as far as I've been able to pull off so far. You can improve it, but you can't make it appear. So obviously, if you're the musician in the room, that's on you. You got to be playing it with emotion, which is hard to do when you're really focused about how it sounds. It's kind of like a technical and a creative side. You got to do both. If you're the mixer in the room, you can encourage the people that are sending you tracks to get this right, and you can check on those tracks before you start mixing them that it's there.
Yeah, totally. All right, and I mean, I know this kind of stuff sounds obvious, but I know from experience from we have a coaching program as well at the Self-Recording Band, and I work with so many artists as a mixing engineer, and I know for a fact that a lot of the mixing problems for people come from them not taking this seriously, and then they fight their own tracks and they question their decisions because what they want is just not in those tracks to begin with. So mic choice and selection, obviously, like all the getting right at the source type of thing. By the way, we're going to do a talk on how to get it right at the source tomorrow, I think, on this stage. So in this here, we're just going quickly through this and then focus on the mix part. Tomorrow, we're going to focus on the recording part and how to get it right at the source. The next one, Malcolm, I think also pretty obvious but important. If you don't want to fix a bad room, noise, clipping, any of that stuff, so get that done first. You don't want to deal with that in the mix. Be your future self's best friend, like I said. And this one's for the people who mix for others. Not everyone will agree here, but I think, and did you actually do that as well? What I did, like the whole remote production sort of thing?
Yep.
Because I think if you mix for others and they send you stuff that is not ideal, and your job is to do a great mix, maybe help them out during the recording process. Maybe offer kind of a remote production package if necessary. Do whatever you can to help the artist if it's self-produced, especially. If you're working with good producers, obviously that's not really a thing, but if you're working with self-producing artists and they are having a hard time capturing good tracks, maybe help them in the recording process. Do whatever you can to get the best possible, to put yourself in a good spot when you're mixing, because ultimately your name is going to be on the record. The artist is going to be super happy if you go out of your way to help them get it right from the beginning. So did you ever do that, actually?
I did, but I want to draw attention to you, actually. So, Benny, how many songs a year do you mix on average?
So it's currently 250-ish.
250 songs in a single year professionally. That's not because he's a great mixer. Well, it is. It's obviously part of it. But it's because of that part.
Thanks.
Because he doesn't only just mix, he also coaches them the whole way from the start to that mixing point a lot of the time. He's got that side going as well. And it's the quality of tracks that are then arriving make it so much easier for you to do a great mix. It's like a hack code to getting a good mix. It's just making sure you get great tracks. So Benny gets very involved very early, and it's amazing the results he gets, because I could never mix that many songs. That's too much.
But we'll get to another reason for how it's able to do that without cutting corners. And the main reason for that is walking around there behind the camera is like Thomas, because Thomas is working with me at the studio.
Yes,
and he's prepping
coming.
a lot of the sessions for me, and like having that that obviously helps. I wouldn't be able to do it without him, so thank you. Comping and editing. Clean up your session, comp and consolidate. What I mean is, ideally, do it on the fly as you record. Like learn your DAW really, learn the hotkeys, learn how to do that quickly, and then have an extra editing step before you go to the mixing phase. So separate the two from the mixing process, I think, because when you mix and at the same time fix mistakes and you go back and forth constantly, you're switching between the creative side of your brain and the technical side, and you're not really into the song. You never get into that flow state. So separate the two processes. And I'd say do as much as you can on the fly while you're tracking, like at least make notes or mark the best takes and like make it easy for yourself. Then do a separate editing process, and then go to the mix. Would you agree?
I would 100% agree. I think that's like the constant struggle of why people struggle getting into recording is you ultimately got into this because you love making music, you're creative, but how do you still balance figuring out these technical sides? And it really comes down to learning your chops. If you treat your DAW and your studio environment like an instrument, you'll learn how to play it, just like you know how to play your main instrument, and you will be very happy that you did that.
Yeah. Okay, so now the actual mix prep. I would recommend that everyone creates a basic mixing template. And I'm not saying do something so that you can do the same thing over and over again. That's not the point at all. It's about what we've been talking about with Warren Hewitt over there just a half an hour ago. We're talking about this where he said and I totally agree, where he says if you systemize a few things, you actually have more time and more freedom to be creative because you don't have to do the repetitive stuff over and over again and focus on that. And I would recommend don't start with a very fancy mix template that has all the bells and whistles. If it's the first time you're creating one, do a simple one. Focus on routing and making it easy to navigate the session, and then add over time. Because I've seen from the people that I've worked with and also coached, they see a template or multiple templates and workflows from different mixers, and then they try to do all of those things that they've learned and apply it to their template. They see Michael Brower do the Browerize thing with the multiple buses, and then they see someone else use this or that plugin, and they create this monster of a template before they even did their first mix, basically. And so keep it simple, I'd say, and then develop your own way of doing things, because it will be different from what I do, from what you do, from what everyone else will be doing. One thing I think a template should include, and one thing I think it's very useful to have, is a color scheme. Simple things like that. A certain way you color your tracks, you label your tracks so you can navigate the session. Like if I'm opening up a session, I want to know immediately what I'm looking at. And so you probably follow
the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Color coding, naming convention is already there. There's nothing about repeating a task is creative at all, right? I just said that half hour ago to Warren as well. If you have to make a kick track twice in a row, you just wasted time. You've already done it once. Why isn't it there right when you open up the session, right?
Yeah, and don't assume that you can remember everything, because when you collaborate with someone else, it seems obvious to like label tracks properly and like tell them what it actually is that you're working with. But even if you're mixing your own stuff, if there's a little bit of time between the recording and the mixing, and if you separate the sessions even more so, don't assume that you're gonna know what audio point 1, point 3, point 6 final was, right? Like make sure that you actually label tracks and again, be your future self's best friend. So when you're opening up the mixing session, you're dragging in tracks, you know what you're looking at. Sometimes we skip these things because we think like, I'm not gonna know anyways, but it's not the case, and it's just faster. So, okay, markers to navigate the session. I'm gonna show you a session example in a second. We use kind of a global marker for the entire song so that I always have the exact same starting and end points when I do an export. I wanna have that consistent. But then also markers for certain parts of the song. I want to be able to quickly move to verse 1, chorus, bridge, intro, whatever. So take the time. I think it's worth taking the time to do that.
Yep.
And just have a marker track in your template, and then when you prep the mix, have the markers for the song.
Absolutely agree.
So Malcolm, this is different between the two of us, I think, but I think most mixers have some kind of a busing thing. Like some people just mix into one mix bus and that's it. But I think many people these days especially use like a drum bus or a guitar bus or an instrument bus or multiple buses. Everyone needs to find out their own way of doing things. But I like what I learned from you actually, like the way you put it was you said you want to have like a frame at the beginning of the mix that you're like similar to painting a picture inside of a frame. You want to create that frame first so you know what you're dealing with. And I do the same thing. Like I recommend you set up like a mix bus and maybe some basic subgroups and then mix into those instead of slapping it all in at the end of it. That helps the workflow a lot. And also if you already established a good balance and a good mix and then at the end you put on all the bus work, your mix could the balances and everything just change and everything could fall apart. So I would highly recommend mixing into a chain that you can react to. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what you do, because the way you put it with the whole framing thing really was a good way to understand it.
To me, it's kind of creating a canvas that you're going to paint within. And if you don't have that, there's no borders, and you're kind of just constantly expanding into new directions. So by having some basic routing and busing figured out, with probably some processing, both Benny and I are big fans of mixing into some plugins, you're going to kind of start finding like the borders of your painting canvas. So, the big example is, probably everybody here uses some kind of bus compressor on their drums, right? I see heads nodding. It's pretty common, right? So why don't we kind of have that similar mindset? Because drums don't sound normal until they're kind of getting glued together like that, generally. So apply that to other instrument groups as well, but not only through the processing, but just having it routed to an easily kind of selectable folder bus or something like that. We can now see all of our instrument groups together and just toggle in and out. We can do global automations to them there. It's like really much faster having a big group of all of your different instrument groups stemmed together all in a row right there. Highly recommend.
Cool. Yeah, so the next thing is I would set up basic effects channels, effects returns for effects that you're going to be using often, and give yourself some options there. Again, don't start really crazy. I don't know what you would recommend starting with. A reverb, a delay, maybe one or two reverbs.
It's again that idea of there's no point in doing something you've already done. So if you always use an 8th note slap delay on your vocal, you should have one just living there that you can just turn on and just see if it works, right? That you don't have to go and create that track, find the plugin, dial it in. Just have it tempo synced, living there. Every session's automatic.
Yeah, and I know it's under mix prep, but honestly, I would do this in the template to a degree. Then as you mix and create new effects returns to new things you want to try, if you find something that worked for you, just make a note and then add it to your template so next time you don't have to do it again. So sometimes I just discover things, I try things that I see somewhere, and then I'm like, oh, that's actually cool, I want to use that more. And then it goes to my template, and over time from I started with like a room, a reverb, like I had a room, a plate, a slap delay and a quarter note delay or something like that. That's what I started with. And then now I have, I don't know, 20 effects returns in a folder so I can hide them if I don't need them. But now I have like choruses, flangers, parallel compression stuff, whatever in my template, all kind of dialed in so I can just pick and choose and A/B quickly and then take it from there. But don't start with that, just build over time.
Start small. What I do is I have a note document on my computer where if I like something, I just make a note in there, okay, add this to my template. And then once there's a kind of a bit of a list there, I'll go update the template with all my notes, the things I wanted to change in it. Because you'll also make mistakes. You'll be like, oh, the toms are panned reverse. I can't handle that. And you're fixing it every time, but you just got to fix it as you go.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so gain staging and getting a quick rough mix going, and basic balancing in the beginning. I think this is also part of this and still kind of part of mix prep before you go into the details and EQ and the compression, all of that. And I think it's super important because context is everything. You mentioned this morning that we should definitely talk about this as well, and I think it's totally right because, explain why.
Yeah, well, I think when I first started mixing, I started with the kick. That's kind of the sound that I was obsessed with and associated with like hard, big rock sounding albums is the kick drum. So I would solo the kick and just mix away until it sounded awesome. And then I would take it out of solo and be like, the kick still sounds like awesome, but it was super loud and everything else was quiet. There was no mix to mix into, right? It was just really a kick drum on its own. So the solution to that is always starting with a rough balance, always getting a rough mix. And this shouldn't take long at all. But this is like just grabbing faders, getting things balanced so that it actually sounds like a song and sounds like the right song when you click play. It should always sound like the song when you click play. And now when you solo the kick drum, which I still do, I still start with my kick drum, mix away, unsolo it, and I can actually see how it relates to the rest of the song, right? If you don't take everything into account with every decision you do, you're really not mixing a song, you're just making a good sounding kick drum in my example. Does that make sense? So have not.
Okay, cool, thank you. Another point here is like, I think you have one very special, unique moment when you start a mix, especially if it's not your own song, but even if you've heard it, it's kind of, there's this one moment when you start the mix and you do an initial balance and you pull up faders, you hear it one time, you hear it like a listener for the first time and you react to the song with like intuition, and that moment is very important. So I like to do a very quick one pass rough mix with just volume balances because like that's my initial reaction to the song. Like I think like this should be about this loud, this should be about here, and past a certain point that objectivity is gone and I want to capture that initial reaction as quickly as possible. I might even also grab an EQ or do some really quick like tweaks, but just one quick pass, and then I save that rough mix. And I tend to go back to that later in the mixing process sometimes because as we go into the details and the individual tracks, sometimes we go down a rabbit hole and we lose objectivity, and before we know it, our balances are off, and then we can check our initial reaction, our initial rough mix, and be like, oh, that makes way more sense. Yeah, I had the guitars here, and now they're way quieter or whatever. So saving that first reaction is important to me, and I try to keep my levels and everything kind of consistent throughout the entire mixing process. I start with this basic balance, and then I try to compensate for any volume changes so that this initial thing kind of stays the same. So yeah. For me, this was a big workflow improver. Then, like I said, whenever you discover a new favorite thing, whatever it is, save it to your template so you have a quickly available option next time. Then one question here, who here mixes, if you mix a record, who here mixes all of the songs in the same session? Does anybody do that?
We got one.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, maybe two.
Yes, yeah. So sometimes I think it's better to do individual and serve the song, and for many genres this is like the way to do it because every song is unique. But there are genres, there are things where it's supposed to be kind of the same thing and the bands want that. So I work a lot in like heavy music, rock, punk rock, hardcore, indie stuff, and there it's like the band doesn't want a different drum sound on every track. They want a drum sound for the entire thing, or the producer wants that. And so why would I do the same things in like 10 different sessions instead of just doing that in one session? And then you got to automate a lot, so it's got to be automation hell if you do that, of course, because you want to serve every single song. But to me, on some projects, I'm like 5 times faster if I mix the record in a session. And I can also like get the transitions between the songs, like all that to me is like this holistic piece of art where it's almost this one consecutive song, basically. And then there's other projects, of course, where it doesn't make sense. But think about it. Maybe you have a project like that every once in a while, and it would make sense to try that, because a lot of people just never think of that.
Yeah, and the more consistently it was recorded, the better this will work, of course. If the drums were all recorded in the same session, with the same drum kit, same drummer, guitars were all the same guitar, it's going to be perfect. You'll love it. It saves so much time.
Okay, good. So, and again, my favorite workflow tool is Thomas, who works with me at my studio. And I'm saying this because if you get the chance, like if you do this professionally especially, maybe you can get to the point where you can hire an assistant or get an intern, someone to help you prep the mixes. Because it's not only that you have less work, you can do more work and you have less work to do in individual songs. The biggest benefit is that I can be way more objective. I'm so thankful every single day for the work that Thomas does, because when I go in and I open up a session and I hit play, I can immediately mix and react to the song, versus spending so much time with the song before I start mixing. And so even if you don't have that luxury yet, you can, by systemizing these things, by having templates and stuff, you can reduce the time that you need to spend with the song before you get creative. And the more you can do that, the better you will be, the better the mixing workflow will be. And the ideal situation is if you can collaborate with someone, try that out, because you can team up with someone like that and partner. It's a game changer, really. And maybe you have someone in the band who can do that. Maybe you have a friend. Maybe you can have an intern, whatever. But like, yeah, I can only recommend that. I cannot recommend that enough, and I should have done it earlier. So, all right. Next point, monitoring system. Just real quick. I think most people doing it at home should have a good pair of headphones, not just speakers, because it takes the room out of the equation. Most importantly, though, the one thing I really want to mention is here, learn it. Learn your monitoring system. Because most rooms are problematic, most speakers are not ideal, like even, it's never an ideal situation. And what's fascinating to me is that so many people listen to music everywhere, but never in the spot that they're actually mixing in. So, we listen to music all day in the car and our earbuds, wherever, but they never sit down and listen to music at the spot that they're mixing in. And so it's very hard to know what things are actually supposed to sound like. And the more you do that, the more you calibrate your ears, the whole workflow is totally different, because you sit down, you hit play, and you know immediately, oh, that's too loud, that's too bassy, that's too bright. So just take the time and learn that system. Malcolm, do you change volumes all the time when you mix?
Never. No. I've got 2 volumes I mix at, and they're marked on my monitor controller, and that's how I listen to music when I'm in that room generally. Okay, honestly, I do turn it up sometimes when I'm just listening to music, because Zeppelin's better loud. But when I'm doing my own work, and I try to do this even when I'm just listening to music, I just choose one main volume, and then I've got a dim button that I click, which will turn it down. I can't even remember how many dB, but quite a bit, to a very low volume. And the reason for that is because our ears perceive frequency balances differently at different volumes. So if you are constantly changing the volume, you are kind of constantly changing how you perceive how your mix sounds. And that's pretty problematic. So you might find that you need to kind of get more attack on a certain instrument with a high volume or versus a low volume. And you're now constantly making decisions that are contradicting themselves. You're also probably continually going louder and louder and louder and louder, and then a little louder as the day goes on. And your ears are just totally shot by the end of the day. So by having this kind of one main volume, you kind of set that conservatively as low as you're comfortable with, and then your ears are just going to last way longer throughout the day. It's kind of a longevity game, because most of us eventually go deaf because we listen to too much loud music.
Yeah. Yeah. So, spend time with your monitors and headphones, like we said, with the next thing. Learn, that one is like controversial. Some people say like, you shouldn't mix with your eyes and all of that. I am a firm believer that if you use analyzers correctly, they are a huge workflow improver, workflow tool. And the goal is not to mix with your eyes, but it's about making better decisions way faster. So do you ever look at analyzers for certain things?
I do, and actually because of you mostly. Benny and I have a podcast, so we chat a lot, and he kept telling me he was doing this. And I eventually realized it's not about making decisions based on what you see, it's about double checking that what you hear is correct. And you're like, okay, there's something weird going on here, and now you can see it and confirm that it's not just your room causing something, it's not your headphones, it's actually in the track. You can kind of double check your work. It's like somebody looking over your shoulder and being like, yeah, there is something really peaking right here. Like, what's going on right there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's dangerous because just because it looks weird, it doesn't mean there's a problem.
Yeah.
But the other way around, if you think you hear a problem, you can confirm that assumption, or be like, oh, well, I guess maybe that's somewhere else, But or you could be like, I think the guitars are super harsh and there's a whistling frequency in the upper mid-range. Maybe it's that guy.
Could be that.
And then, you can, it's not that you should use that and then based on that make decisions, but confirm what you're hearing. This is also a big part of the next thing here, of the fifth way to improve the mixing workflow with it, which is know what you want, and this includes your vision, but also referencing. When I use reference tracks, I not just listen to them, obviously that's the most important thing, but I also like to look at them on different analyzers, because having the two different senses, like hearing it, but then also seeing the difference to my mix, helps me a lot to understand what's really going on. Because I might think the one thing is more bassy, but then if I also see it and I can see which frequency it is, it just helps me learn better. It helps me learn the differences better, where the gap actually is. And so I think that's very useful. This one is a great tool, by the way. It's Metric AB. It's a plugin you put on your master, or like the control room in Cubase, or your output, wherever. And you can just load up reference mixes, switch A/B between your mix and that, and you can have all kinds of different data and analyzers and stuff, and you can just seamlessly switch back and forth, also between your own mix versions. So really helpful tool. So yeah. Now, Malcolm, do you ever do that with the extreme examples to make sure you're in the ballpark?
I don't think I do like you do. What I do is I pretty much just load up songs that I know universally are loved and sound good in the genre that I'm working in. And then I just make sure mine sounds like it belongs. I'm very quick with reference mixes. I'm not ever trying to like make my low end sound like another song's low end. That's not relevant to me. And I found that when I did do that, I started chasing something. I actually made things a lot worse, because I got obsessed with how one song sounded, but that wasn't the song I was mixing. So it was kind of a fool's errand. But just simply playlisting and being like, all right, this is a good song, this is a good song, why does this song sound bad? Damn, that's the song I'm working on. I gotta keep working here. Then you can start addressing, okay, well, mine sounds dull, theirs sounds bright, maybe I need to look at that. That's kind of the power of referencing for me.
Yeah, I tend to use the extremes, where like if my song's way bassier than that one, I'm probably going too far. If my song's way harsher than the other one, I'm probably going too far. So I tend to use extreme examples to try to get me in the ballpark. But then also sometimes I try to get a certain sound, and the challenge is to do that without actually chasing that sound or like trying to copy it. That's not what you want, but like that's like kind of the art here, is to listen to a reference, figuring out what you like about it, apply that to your song without trying to copy it, because you will always fail doing that. Like it will never work. You can never copy another song, and you shouldn't try to do that, but you can still get useful information from like these references. Okay, so the last one here, the last way is move fast and take breaks. So objectivity, of course, the faster you move, the better that is, because you just get close to it. When you work slowly and you spend more time with the song, you're just not objective anymore. I think a lot of people need to make more bold decisions, trust their intuition, move forward, and try to not look back. Your mix will never be perfect. It's just done and abandoned at some point, but it will never be perfect, especially the first couple of mixes you'll do. And the more music you work on, the better it will get. And it's a skill to be like, I just move forward, I trust that what I heard is right, and that I like what I did, and I do the next decision, and I don't constantly question all of my decisions. So that is like a mindset thing, but a game changer for me in terms of workflow. If you just say like, I trust that I hear this correctly, and I move on. And you will be wrong sometimes, but you gotta learn to do that. Serve the song even if it means breaking the rules. Sometimes it looks like the wrong thing to do. It's a crazy EQ move or way too much compression, seemingly, or whatever. Still might be the right thing. So feel free to break the rules if it sounds good. Trust your intuition. There are no rules, really. Come up with a simple, repeatable mixing process that works for you. What I mean there is, what are the steps that you're going through each time, and is there an order that makes the most sense to you? The reason for that is that the amount of decisions that you can make in a day is limited. You have a limited decision-making capacity. So use it for the things that really matter. The less the number of decisions you have to make, the better it is. Meaning, if you have to decide each time, like, which plugin am I usually using for this? So what did I do last time that worked so well? And which of the effects returns do I want? And how do I route my drums? It's all these tiny decisions, and before you know it, you're just fatigued. You can't make good decisions anymore. So if you find yourself doing things over and over again in a certain order that just works for you, your personal workflow, make a checklist, make a template. Try to not have to think about that anymore, because the more decisions you eliminate, the more bandwidth you have for the important decisions. That's the whole reason. And everyone has a different workflow, but just try to create a way of doing things that works for you, and then never think about it again. The last two here, and I gotta move fast because we're past half the hour and we gotta quit very soon, but we're on the last slide anyways. So think in terms of groups of instruments and how they interact. So think broad in terms of like small and narrow, I think oftentimes helps. think about the role of each element in the mix and how it serves the song. I mean, instead of each individual guitar mic, think rhythm guitars, think drums, bass, groups of things, bass plus guitars or drums, and how the groove comes together and all of that. It oftentimes helps to not get lost in the details. And then stay in this flow state for as long as possible, of course, but then also realize when you're done and just need to take a break. The longer you can stay in a flow state and it just flows and it's awesome and you like it, then stay in there, if possible, for hours. But at some point, you will find yourself second guessing everything and going back and forth and not really liking the process anymore, and then just take a break. So there's that. And then you added one thing about a stable rig obviously helps too.
Yeah. Buying a new computer. We shouldn't tell you to buy new gear to solve your problems, but that honestly solves so many problems for me. If your computer is constantly unable to handle your mix, then it's probably the biggest thing preventing you from getting into a flow state and doing your best mixing, right? Like, it's just constant like, oh, it's CPU jammed again. I got to freeze tracks. That'll take 4 minutes for this. It's so painful. And now it's gone. Computers are so good now. It's great.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming here, for joining us. I hope this was valuable. I know it's fast, but thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions, just talk to us.